All right, welcome to GothCast, episode 26. I'm Dr. Sanders,
This is Robbie Gore.
and today we're going to be taking a look at some movies. Yet again, it's been a few episodes since we've done this, and it's three movies that I actually picked for a very specific reason. They each have very dark kind of tones, and they're all kind of based in a little bit of a strange reality.
I feel like each of these films really fits the mold of sort of noir, science fiction, semi-thriller kind of genre, where each of these movies has a very intricate plot going on and a lot of things that mess around with your mind and definitely explore very dark ideas and sentiments about society and the nature of reality and the way humanity exists and interacts and what it is to be alive and perceive things.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I really enjoyed about doing this episode is, man, these are not three movies you want to watch back to back. Like,
No.
because man, you would be all kind of screwed up. Like, what is real and what's not? Maybe not that far, but definitely you would kind of be like, whoa, like you perceive things maybe a little bit differently. So our choices for this week are Dark City from 1998, The City of Lost Children from 1995, and Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, these are very, very different movies, but they all have this very specific thing in common in that they have kind of noir elements, or they have kind of a different time, but it's supposed to be like the future. It's supposed to be like a very strange, undetermined period.
Yeah, they're all somewhat, I would say, dystopian future films.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, not to the stereotype of the genre, but they're definitely dystopian in nature, and they're sort of futuristic films.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the things is, like, in Brazil, I think they say, like, sometime in the future, like, it's supposed to be, like, a very weird time.
Yeah.
But each of these films approaches it in a very different way. And not saying that the time period or that kind of thing determines whether the movie's good or not, but it definitely gives each of these films a very unique sort of look and sort of way to present their story. So
Yeah.
this is kind of the sci-fi dystopian noir episode.
Yeah. If any of you guys remember The Matrix and how weird that was, just get ready.
Yeah, these are a little. Some of these, one's actually kind of similar to that, but yeah, well, in some ways. But let's just get into it. We're going to do reverse chronological order this time, so it's going to be Dark City, then City of Lost Children, then Brazil. So basically going backwards.
Yeah, we got to mix it up.
Yeah, got to mix it up, and let's just get on to it. So with Dark City.
Yeah, so this film was released in 1998, directed by Alex Proyas, and the screenplay is written by Proyas along with Lem Dobbs and David S. Goyer. And the film stars Rufus Sewell, Kiefer Sutherland.
Kiefer Sutherland?
Oh my God.
Kiefer
Yeah, I
Sutherland.
don't know why I just read that as Kiefer. The film stars Rufus Sewell, Kiefer Sutherland, Jennifer Connelly, and William Hurt. And Sewell obviously plays Murdoch, who is the protagonist of the film. Murdoch has amnesia. It's kind of how the film opens.
Yeah, basically, it's a little hard to explain this plot without spoiling a lot, so we're going to try and tiptoe around some of it, but obviously,
Yeah.
when we get into it, I mean, this movie is almost 20 years old, so I just want to kind of put that out there. But yeah,
Yep.
this Murdoch basically wakes up with amnesia and can't really figure out what's going on in this place. He has basically no memories at all.
Yeah,
And-
he's been in a hotel for 3 weeks, and he doesn't know that. He's really confused as to what's going on.
Yeah, there's a woman who's been murdered inside of the hotel room that he wakes up in, and he's just like, what is happening? Like, he has no idea.
Yep.
What's going on?
He also has like multiple personalities are like kind of popping up and stuff.
Something like that. Yeah, he has basically these weird memories that are somewhat fuzzy in his head.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of hesitant, even when I read the kind of the little summary on the back of like the DVD, because I bought the DVD a while ago, and I was like, like amnesia, I was like, it's been done so many times. Usually ends the same way, and
Usually something similar to Memento.
yeah, something like that. And Memento is really well done. It's actually one of the better
is.
amnesia movies. But you know what I'm saying? Like it becomes very predictable for a lot of movies whenever they do the amnesia thing. And so I was like, but it kept coming up as like one of those movies that's like recommended if you like Blade Runner.
Yep.
And I was really hesitant because I watched even the trailer. I watched the trailer and I was like, this doesn't seem that great, And then I sat down and actually watched it, I was like, this is a very interesting movie, and definitely has some problems, but for the time, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I think we're probably definitely going to address the issues that the film has. But right off the bat, I would like to say what this film does really well is it presents what I would say is a very original story, even for this being an amnesia film. And it does it's storytelling in a very creative way. And you have concepts being presented to you that are really interesting and really thought-provoking. And for that reason, I feel like I can forgive some of its perhaps not so good features.
I can agree with that. Actually, is that a lot of the good does make up for the bad for the most part. One of the good things about this movie is the kind of visual style. It is very unique, and the way it's like the neo noir kind of thing, where it's like 50s, 60s kind of like dress and motif and cars and everything, like technology, but it's still like the future. It's a very unique look, and it's color graded, like the way that the movie is filmed and presented and edited is a very unique kind of thing. It's kind of like darker tones and kind of just a spooky, all-around creepy atmosphere.
Yeah, everything is very much color graded and shot to look a very specific way, and it's very much a noir film. It definitely harkens to things like like Blade Runner or like Sin City, even with like some of its more specifically noir characteristics.
Yeah, in that it's trying to take that kind of idea and then making it a more modern and more like completely different kind of story, obviously, to a noir.
Yeah.
Those are like the main really good things about it. I also feel like the actors really actually do their roles very well.
I agree with that.
I love the main guy in this. Like John Murdoch, the character, he's so well done.
Yep. I would say that all these, most of the characters have a very present and a very well thought out personality.
Yeah.
And I think that really works to the film's advantage. I didn't always like the script a lot, but I felt like it was always executed well.
Yeah, the script, some of the dialogue is a little clumsy.
Yeah.
Especially with some of the characters you don't see a lot of screen time with them.
Yeah.
Like I think there's the uncle character. Like specifically, I felt like he was just kind of like not super well done.
Yep.
Kiefer Sutherland, I gotta give him credit. When people think of Kiefer Sutherland, especially if you're into goth stuff, you probably think of Kiefer Sutherland as the blonde-haired vampire instead of Lost Boys. Instead of this movie, he's completely different.
Yeah, I love Kiefer Sutherland in this movie.
Yeah, he really seems like he immersed himself in that role, and he really, really holds on to it and really pulls that kind of character.
I hardly noticed that it was Kiefer Sutherland while I was watching it. And
it took me a while. I'm going to be honest. It took me a while. I was like, that's Kiefer Sutherland? But yeah, he's basically, instead of being like a dreamboat or kind of like a tough guy or kind of swab guy, he's this like dorky little scientist who basically seems like he has like OCD or something like that. And he kind of talks like this, and we should be together, everyone.
Yeah.
Really strange and really creepy.
He is a very creepy doctor. Our first introduction to him is he calls our protagonist Murdoch and basically tells him that he needs to see him, there's stuff wrong with them, and then we have a more direct introduction to him when Murdoch's wife goes to visit him, and he basically explains that her husband has had a psychotic break and cannot be trusted, and
yep.
and that if she hears of anything, she should tell him immediately, and that they should consider themselves friends. And
yeah, he's definitely a character that plays a lot of different sides.
Yeah.
And I gotta be honest, I mean, while I do like Murdoch for his gritty noir character type of thing, I really feel like almost the main character of this movie is Kiefer Sutherland's character.
Yeah.
Like, because he does the most. Like, he does, I mean, yeah, while Murdoch does go through, like, all this stuff, it's like Schreiber, like, I think that's how you pronounce it, what they say. But yeah, he's, like, basically guiding all what's happening. He basically is the one who is responsible for most of it.
There's things that they do in the film that kind of allude to him being the mastermind. Like when you see him and the wife interact, he has the rat running through the little maze. It kind of harkens to perhaps what he's doing with people and stuff.
Yeah.
Especially because our first conversation that we see with him is just him calling Murdoch and being like, you need to run from this group of men. Which what I will say I found to be hard to wrap my head around when I first started watching the movie, because I was like, why does he just trust this guy if he has amnesia and like...
Well, it's kind of like the thing with the... Actually, that scene in particular reminds me of the beginning of The Matrix, where he's like, you don't know who I am. You maybe have some... It's like even more so, though, because inside The Matrix, he kind of has an idea of who Morpheus is. But then, like, in this one, he's just like, yeah, just go. Trust me. You must run.
Yeah, you must run from those who are pursuing you.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is whole thing, and I really think that Schreiber has this whole... the interaction between Schreiber and everyone else is really interesting. Not only is Murdoch good as a character, but Schreiber is too. And I can say that pretty much most of the other characters aren't as good as those two, which is unfortunate. But, like, as movie characters in, like, a neo-noir type of thing, they're pretty great.
I definitely agree with that. Neo-noir films kind of tend to be hit-or-miss films.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like, they're either really well done or they're very poorly done.
Yep.
And I want to say this is really well done, but it's not a perfect movie.
I think one of the problems, my biggest issue with this whole movie is the villains. I don't feel that they are the most... I mean, while they're creepy, it's like they never really connected that they were exactly responsible for what's happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. They don't seem like a huge threat in the movie. Like Murdoch himself almost seems like more of a threat to himself and to what's going on, and just because of he doesn't know how to understand how things are happening. And I mean, obviously he gains some more mental capacity as the movie goes on. Learns he has powers.
Yeah, that's also one of the biggest issues with this movie, and one that it's like frustrating because it works well, but sometimes it doesn't. And the biggest thing about this movie that is aged the worst is the special effects.
Yeah.
Now, some of the special effects are actually pretty cool, like the cities collapsing and all that stuff. Like, that's actually kind of well done. And, like, the set design and stuff is really cool. But the powers and stuff in this...
Yep.
Oh, man, they look like some 1998 CG. And it's very unfortunate, because when people are acting and they're on these, like, very ornate sets that are really fleshed out in this world that is, very dense... It really, really works. Like, this movie really comes together. But whenever you have these fight scenes where they're having to fight with powers and all this stuff, it just is not very good.
This is one category where The Matrix wins out.
Yeah, Matrix actually does hold up surprisingly well.
It does.
Sometimes. In some scenes. But this one, the powers don't really work that well. And
I think they could have done without the powers, to be honest with you.
I totally agree.
Yep.
In fact, I think actually the acting is good enough to where it could have, and the setup and stuff for it is perfect, And
they still have enough thought-provoking things without giving him powers. Like, I kind of get the point of the powers is, like, the fact that he can, like, create, like, whole, like, worlds or, like, atmospheres and scenes and settings and stuff.
Basically become God.
Yeah, more or less. But I feel like you could have done that just by questioning what's real and not necessarily calling them powers or making it so explicit that he directly controls, or can control what happens or how things are created. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just felt like that particular thing was perhaps a little overdone.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the coolest concepts that this movie puts out there and it doesn't really go super deep into it, but it touches on it enough to where it's interesting, is the idea of, like, is your personality you and what makes you human and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, that's what I love about Blade Runner, I think Blade Runner does it perfectly, where it's like, at what point are you human, what makes you human?
Yes.
And this movie's more about, like, what makes you you, not necessarily what makes you human, but what makes you specifically special and makes you unique.
Yeah.
And yourself.
What makes the world? Like, how do we exist? Why do we exist? Do we really exist? I feel
Yeah.
like this movie definitely brings up all those questions.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. They bring them up, and then they also try to throw some bigger questions out there that they don't really, and I wouldn't say touch on as well.
Yeah.
But I think the idea that like the personalities and everything that's unique about you, that you think in your brain, like, oh, I learned all these things. These are all like, I'm intelligent because of this. I'm in this part of my life because of this. And they basically, with all the people in this movie, they get swapped around all the time, and like every single person. So you could basically wake up and be a completely different person. So say you're like super poor, these creatures can manipulate your mind and change like your life, and so you wake up and you're a completely different person, and you're rich and you are wealthy, whereas the day before you struggled. Or
Yep.
say you were a very, very mean person before, and then you kind of they swap out your personality, and then all of a sudden you're like the nicest person ever, but you don't like remember ever being the other person. So it's just it's a really, really unique thing, and it works in this movie, but I kind of wish they would have done more with it.
Yeah. I would have liked to see perhaps, instead of necessarily, and I know this would require a major rework of the film, but instead of maybe opening with Murdoch having lost his mind and trying to regain facility over it, I would like to see Murdoch slowly lose his mind as he realizes that maybe his personality is not something that he can control, or that as he gains these powers and can shape reality, he's not sure what to believe in, or why he should believe in anything, or why he should care about anything. I feel like that would address the same things in perhaps a way that they would hold up better.
Yeah, probably. I mean, this movie, I gotta say, while it is really good, and keep in mind, this is from the director of The Crow, so
Hey, I think that's a fun movie. That's
what, The Crow?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, it has its issues, but
It
yeah,
it definitely does.
so that's why I think it has a very unique aesthetic, and it has more. I think it almost has more of the placement on the aesthetic than the actual film, and especially when it has like the climax. Like I almost feel like the fight is almost a little shoehorned in here.
Yeah, I thought it was
sake of it.
stupid.
But yeah, it doesn't hold up as well. Like yeah, you could make those changes, but it'd be a completely different movie.
It would.
And
That's why I said,
yeah, but as is, I mean, this movie was actually pretty popular when it came out. It didn't make like a ton of money. It's one of those kind of like bit of a cult hit that most people haven't seen. I do recommend it.
Yeah.
It does have issues, but I do really recommend you give this movie a look because it is still really unique in what it does. But yeah, it does have some issues. I feel like the powers thing is like kind of almost detracts from the movie. It's good in the beginning, where it's kind of like mysterious.
Yeah.
But when they have basically a action fight with powers in the end and all this stuff, it just like doesn't really work for me.
Yeah.
And it would have been, I think, a lot better without it.
Yeah, or like even if you are going to have the introduction of powers, I cared less about him evading the control of the others by creating like this new world basically. I care more about the idea of him creating a new world, like, and that he has that ability, and how one person's perception of reality can change everything else. I feel like that's infinitely more interesting than the fact that he's trying to evade these people who don't seem that threatening, really. Like,
exactly. Yeah, that's my main issues. I just think the villains aren't, and the villains are kind of. And by the way, the villains are called the Strangers.
yeah.
Like, you think that's a noir reference? But yeah, so it's okay. Like, this movie actually was pretty critically, like, I think Roger Ebert, like, said it was, like, one of his best movies of 1998. And so it actually received, like, a lot of really good press, but it was just didn't really connect with a lot of people at the time.
Yeah.
I think it is worth definitely a viewing, especially if you're into, like, darker movies. Like, this is totally a good one, but it just is kind of, it definitely has problems. It's kind of like, very similar to The Crow. It has a lot of issues, but like kind of static and everything. There's a lot of cool things about it,
I will say, I feel like the things like The Crow is fun because we have all these associations with the comic book, and like the aesthetic style is very pronounced and very interesting and fun to watch.
Yeah.
The Crow's just a fun movie despite its flaws. I would say this movie is less fun and more thought-provoking than The Crow
Oh,
is.
absolutely.
And so for that reason alone, I kind of think this is a better film than The Crow. And I think it might have done better had it been released closer to The Crow.
Maybe it's hard to say. I don't know if they're necessarily better because they're trying. These two movies trying two completely different things. Like,
I would agree, but I feel like this movie accomplishes more. Like, I feel like the reason that The Crow holds up so much is because of everybody's love for the character, and because it's a fun movie. And I feel like this movie was more ambitious.
this movie is definitely more ambitious. I could say that without a doubt. Trying to bring up all these questions about humanity and all that, but yeah, it's not the best movie in terms of like holding up. But yeah, I definitely recommend it.
I would as well, albeit with some caveats. Take it with a grain of salt. Don't expect this to be a film masterpiece.
Yeah, exactly. So just check it out for yourself. Don't watch the trailer; it doesn't really do it justice.
Yeah. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, so that's Dark City. This is going to be the random, interesting goth stuff for this podcast.
Yep.
And one that I thought was actually pretty cool is, if you're familiar with the band Community FK, they're actually going to be playing a few West Coast shows. And if you're up on anything that has to do with death rock or goth stuff, you're probably familiar with Release the Bats.
They are Long Beach-based goth night at a club out in Long Beach, and so I feel like we don't really need to explain that.
Yeah, it's just yeah. So it's gonna be at K-Sarah, and the one that we're going to be going to is gonna be April 22nd, and I guess you could probably go earlier than 10 p.m., but 10 p.m. is when the actual event starts. But if you want to go see Community FK, obviously a big band for death rock and gothic rock kind of sound, very aggressive sort of sound, and this is a chance to actually go see them. And we just thought we'd mention it because we're actually going to be there. So if you want to come and hang out with us, or just kind of ask us anything, or tell us that our opinions on Floodland are wrong or something, then which, by the way, I get a lot of messages about my opinion of Floodland.
Yep. It's okay. I've had people tell me that my opinion of First and Last Noise or of Andrew Eldritch is wrong.
Yeah, actually, we do get quite a bit of the Andrew Eldritch thing. But every time somebody listens to the podcast, they're like, I don't really agree with Dr. Sanders' opinion of Floodland. I'm like,
that's why we have
I just
Robbie
can't
Gore.
win with that one. That's true. That's really true. That's why I keep you around.
It's like I'm talking about myself in the third person.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of nice. I'm gonna do that. Dr. Sanders is amazing. Gonna review ourselves, but back on to track. Community FK is a very interesting band. In fact, they still release music and they do all their videos. And actually, some of their videos are pretty interesting for the new stuff that they've been doing.
Yep.
So if you want to come out, support the scene, everything, we're gonna be there. It's gonna be April 22nd. We'll definitely kind of post you on when as it comes closer. But we thought if you're planning a trip out to California or something like that, and you're going to be in the area at the time. I know a lot of our listeners are actually in the LA area if they're not in the UK.
Yep.
So,
and if you're not specifically in, Orange County, or I guess Long Beach is technically LA County, but it's very close to Orange County. They also have a Los Angeles date.
And San Diego date, too.
San Diego date as well. And they are also playing Colorado, if you happen to live in Colorado, and they're playing an Oakland, California show, and those are kind of interestingly spread out.
Yeah, right.
So we have 3 that are happening back to back in April, and Colorado one's happening in July, and the Oakland one is happening in August.
Yeah. So if that sounds interesting to you, and you've wanted to see Community FK for a long time, this is your chance.
I would like to also point out that whoever's running their website should pay more attention to the spelling, because they posted the date for the the Oakland show as 2106, the year. They're planning to be around for like another 100 years.
No, maybe if it's 21.
It's Saturday, August 27th, 2106.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you need to get on that. So, yeah, that's coming up, right? 2106.
I want to
Well,
post that to our page.
oh, do it.
I will.
It's pretty funny. Do it to like our Instagram or something, or we'll do to both Facebook and everything.
Guys, bookmark your calendars.
Yeah, exactly. 2106 is happening. We'll all be robots or vampires or something.
It will probably be live. I'm sure you and I will be robots. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure by then, definitely. I mean, it's 2016 right now.
Yeah, I know.
This is getting weird. So, yeah, I just thought we'd give an update on that. We thought it was pretty interesting, and yeah, it's a great opportunity to see a good band. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll tell you how it is, just like what we did with 45 Grave when we saw them. You know, we'll go and just kind of give you our opinion.
Come bring us things.
Yes.
We like things.
Yeah, it's lots of things. But it's April 22nd, and it's at K-Sera. And that's QUE space SERA.
Yes.
Release the bats.
Yep.
So, that's random interesting guests. Okay, so now we're on to the second movie, and this was actually the movie that got me out of the rut of movies, if that makes sense. I was getting kind of bored of seeing the same kind of movie all the time, especially, nowadays.
Yeah.
And I decided to get this movie on a whim because I'd seen the trailer like a long time ago, and I thought it looked really interesting. And I love Jean-Pierre Jeunet.
Yeah, he's very famous for particularly Amélie, but also Delicatessen. He has a very specific film style.
It's extremely unique.
Yeah, well, it's very unique for him. It is similar in that it's highly stylized and quirky, and so I think for some people it might harken to Wes Anderson's style of filmmaking.
Yeah, I think that there's very much a similar kind of thing to it, and that Jean-Pierre has a very, very unique style.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, of course, most people are familiar with Amélie, and while Amélie does it does have all the trademarks of it, like a cinematography, like kind of wide-angle shots, the very interesting kind of characters, the unabashed emotions inside of his movies, the kind of whimsical music, all these kind of things, and especially the color tones, the greens and yellows, and just the very eye-popping colors.
Yeah.
The City of Lost Children is when he was still making pretty dark movies, and that's not to say his newer stuff isn't dark. There's definitely some of it, but if you're familiar with Amélie, it's going to be a little bit of a shock.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that because that's his most popular movie, especially stateside.
It's like Amélie mixed with Dark City or Brazil.
That's pretty accurate. So basically the story of it is there's this doctor, a scientist, Kronk.
Yeah, and
Kronk.
he is stealing dreams because he can not have them himself.
Yeah, so he's like this old guy, and he's very creepy looking.
Yeah, he's like this demented scientist person.
Yeah, and he's basically kidnapping children to get their dreams, and he has like all these crazy nightmares about it. Like when he's trying to have their dreams, he's trying to find like the one person who he can like have their dreams like eternally, who basically sleep forever. He can it's really, really interesting plot.
He wants to live in a really bitchin' dream.
Oh yeah, definitely. Very, very unique sort of story. I mean, that's the main setup. But then you have like Ron Perlman as Wong.
Yep.
And you have this little girl Miette.
Yep.
And they are trying to escape from the scientist, basically trying to make sure she doesn't get captured by scientists. And then he's also trying to rescue his brother.
Yeah.
And it's just
Miette.
that's Ron. Yeah.
I was gonna say Miette's part of like a gang of orphan children.
Yeah, and it's really, really interesting. But so Denra, that's Denra. I don't know. They speak French in this movie, like entirely. I've only ever seen the French one, so
yeah.
It's like, so if I'm saying these kind of funky, that's why.
It's a French pronunciation.
Ron Perlman plays a character named One, and his little brother is kidnapped, and he teams up with Miette to try and save him and try and stop the scientist from what he's doing. And One is a very like unaware character. He's a very like lovable oaf kind of character, and he basically is just trying to do what he thinks is right. And there's all these different sort of characters in this story. I mean, there's a lot of characters in here, but they're all so unique and so well done that I just love it. Like, this whole world is so fleshed out, and I just got totally lost in this movie the first time I saw it.
Yeah, I will say that that's one thing this movie does really well, but one thing that all of his movies do really well is Jean-Pierre Jeunet is really good at creating very unique characters that just kind of pull you into the story. I think that's a big trademark of every single one of his films is he spends a great deal of his time on character development, and so you have these very rich characters with vibrant personalities, and you just really you get sucked into it. It's a nice thing to see in a film.
Yeah, I totally agree. And of course, Dominique Pignon is in this. Like, he's inside all of his movies. Like, of course, he's like the main character in Delicatessen, and he's Amelie, and of course, he's inside of.
It's kind of similar to another director with a similar style.
Yeah, but yeah. So, and also, of course, he's in Alien Resurrection. Like, that's his weird. That's the most oddball movie that Jean-Pierre's done is Alien Resurrection. But that's a whole different story. If we ever do an Alien episode, then I'll go into depth on that. But Dominique's in here, and he plays like this other scientist, basically a helper scientist, and there's all clones, and he has like narcolepsy, so he like passes out all the time.
Yep.
And it's just really, really unique story, and it's hard to even kind of do a summary of it. Like, yes, the kidnapping of children is the main part, and there's like this gang of people who have like these crazy eye enhancements.
And they're trying to figure out what the connection is between, Kronk and Donnery or Denry.
Yeah.
However you want to say that.
Yeah. I just really fell in love with this movie, and it's not one of those movies you're going to watch a million times. It's not that kind of movie.
No,
but,
definitely not.
Like, it is really immersive, and it really reminds me of his other movie, Delicatessen, in a weird way. And while Delicatessen, if you're familiar with it, I'm just going to say for anybody who's actually seen Delicatessen, here's a good comparison.
Yeah.
Delicatessen was like a very unique movie, but it almost seemed like a little low budget, in some ways. But with this one, it still has that grittiness of Delicatessen, not as much. Obviously, Delicatessen is like super ridiculously gritty, but it has a higher budget, but I still see them as like really companion movies because they are both extremely unique. They both have very good characters. They both have a very unique look. They both have very great cinematography and music and everything, and the acting is superb. This, though, it just really connected with me on like a really deep level. I don't know why it did exactly, but I was totally sick of watching like movie after movie, and I'd seen like tons of the same kind of movie all the time, and now they're just coming out with reboots and all this stuff.
Yeah.
I was kind of burnt out on like watching movies, and this movie really got me out of that rut. I was like, wow, they can do really interesting things with film, and I'd forgotten that to some extent. So I'll always be grateful for this movie for that. And this was a while ago from when I first saw it, but it definitely kind of picked me up out of that.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you brought up that it's similar to Delicatessen, because I would certainly agree. And I think it's important to note that they are very much companion movies, and people often recognize that, particularly because both Delicatessen and The City of Lost Children are seen as deliberate homages to Terry Gilliam, who is, of course, made a film that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
And so in many ways, I kind of see this as sort of being an homage to kind of Brazil in a way.
In some ways, yeah, definitely the mind and dream and what, that kind of thing, like seeing outside of the peripheral of society or something like that,
And Delicatessen specifically in North America was released with the super title Terry Gilliam Presents.
Yeah. I don't know if he produced it or not, but I definitely know that he like approved it and helped it, like as far as that. Like I definitely
he didn't produce
like,
it, as far as I can tell.
I think it was like he saw it and then like ended up supporting it or something like that. So they put like Terry Gilliam's name to help it.
Yeah.
But I don't know exactly. Like if we do Delicatessen, then I'll like kind of go in on that more. But one of the things I really have to congratulate about City of Lost Children is the child actors are awesome.
Oh, so good.
Especially Miette. Like she's such a good actor for a kid, and I usually do not like kid actors.
I feel like the best movies for kid actors usually tend to be kind of more fantastical and quirky films, and while this is definitely a dark film, it definitely still has that fantastical element to it. And I think that we have a really good director here, and I think, he sought out the right people for this film, and he spent time fleshing out these characters. And so I really think that that just makes for a good story, especially when you have a very deliberate and specific film style, and you have thought out characters, and you have a decent story. You're just going to wind up with a great film.
Yeah, that's true. And one of the things I also want to compare the acting to, especially with the kids, is Pan's Labyrinth, in which the kid, like, every scene that the kid is in pretty much steals the scene.
Yeah.
So this movie's really good. I actually have a hard time finding any flaws with that. I would say that, yeah, some of the, like Dark City, this is 1995, so some of the CG and computery stuff doesn't hold up as well. They have, like, the green smoke stuff and some of the water in effect. Yeah, they don't hold up as well. But because this movie is color graded so heavily, in fact, I'd heard something where they had basically desaturated most of the film and then just went in and colored everything.
It's just kind of how they do things now.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, that's true. But they try to make it look natural. But this just has a very, very unique look, and it works totally well. Like, it definitely gets you out of the idea that, like, these are actors on a set doing this.
Yeah.
Like, you get lost in this world because everything about this is so well thought out and so specifically done.
Definitely.
And so I really don't have a ton of complaints. Like, I just really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I would say that I know that Brazil is technically a better movie, but I think I had the most fun watching this movie of the three.
Yeah, this is probably the most fun out of all the ones that we watched,
Yeah.
and especially compared to Brazil, this definitely has the fantasy element of this.
Yeah.
And the way the actors are presented, the way that the characters are.
Yeah.
It definitely has a lot more of like a journey adventure sort of feel than Brazil does, and it's definitely a lot less serious in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But it still has an extremely dark subject matters, like and definitely some dark scenes in it. So I really recommend it. In fact, I think it's really hard to say, like, because I haven't seen I think the most recent Jean-Pierre film.
Yeah.
But this might be my favorite film by him. I definitely like it more than Delicatessen, but it's close.
It is a close call. I just think he's a really good filmmaker. I feel like it's really hard to choose between his films.
Oh, yeah. What about Alien Resurrection?
Oh, that's a whole
other thing.
Yeah.
So, for me, that's City of Lost Children. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Not really. I will briefly chime in on the color grading and say that I really thought that it was cool the way they did the color grading, and the fact that I didn't know that piece about them desaturating and then going in doing the color grading.
Yeah.
But I felt like the color grading for this film really helped create a style for it that I thought was really great, and I think that's something that would carry over into his later films. Like particularly Amelie, I feel like has really unique color grading as well.
Oh yeah, pretty much all of his films would kind of continue that. He tried to do with Delicatessen, which Delicatessen is very brown and yellow.
Yeah,
but he had a lot less money at the time.
Yeah, it was a very low budget film.
Yeah, like that was they struggled to kind of get all that. In fact, most of the stuff they had to buy like thrift stores and everything, like the props and stuff in the background. So Delicatessen, I'm sure they would have done it.
Yeah.
Like if they could, to that extent. But with this one, they really just went we're like, okay, this is gonna be my world,
Yep.
And yeah, it really, really works. In fact, the skin tones are like the coolest part of it. Like the way the people look, the way that their skin's done, it makes their emotions pop out so much because the way they do the eyes really pop, and the skin tones like really kind of like not normal.
Yeah, everything is very vibrant, which I do appreciate, where things now are pretty much always color graded to the effect where things are somewhat desaturated, and usually they're cooler on the Kelvin scale. Maybe we're getting a bit too nerdy with that, but
yeah, but it looks neat. That's basically what we're trying to say. So that's The City of Lost Children. I think it's absolutely amazing. I wholeheartedly recommend this one. I think if you're not into film that much, if you just kind of like a good adventure movie or a good kind of character piece, you know, this is a really, really great movie. And I think it probably has the widest appeal of all the movies that we're talking about today. So if you kind of want to start with a movie to watch from this episode, and you're not like a super big movie person, I recommend this one.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
And then probably, well, it's hard to say for the next ones, but so that's The City of Lost Children. Okay, so the final movie that we're going to talk about today is 1985 film Brazil, directed by Terry Gilliam.
Yeah.
Now, Terry Gilliam, of course, has done a ton of different things.
Yep.
A lot of people actually know him for the Monty Python crew, like that he's
Yep.
a part of that. And he did like Help with the Life of Brian. He did Time Bandits, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. He did 12 Monkeys. I mean, just
Fisher
so
King, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Like,
yeah, so many things. And
a lot of
this is
things
technically
very different too.
Oh yeah, exactly. And that's what I love about it, isn't it? Like the other movies we're talking about, he has a very unique style. I would say his varies more.
Yeah.
Like, because he gets influenced by so many different things, and so he tries to include a lot of different stuff in all his films, as opposed to Jean-Pierre, where he has a very unique look, and you're like, oh, that's Jean-Pierre. Like, Terry Gilliam has that. It's just that as he goes on in time, he tends to evolve it a lot further per movie. But if you like watch him back to back, sometimes you're like, oh, like 12 Monkeys looks a lot like Brazil, or The Adventures of Baron Munchausen is a lot like Time Bandits, and so a lot of different things. But of course, he also did Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I just wanted to mention that.
Yep.
Just in case people are familiar with him. But Brazil is part of basically a trilogy of movies, like a very loose trilogy that involves Time Bandits and The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, and kind of looks at life in 3 different ways, right? Like from the perspective of a kid, from the perspective of an old man, and Brazil's right in the middle, where it says the perspective of somebody who's like middle-aged.
Yeah.
And it's like a dystopian film, and
definitely science fiction.
Definitely science fiction, and it's like a neo-noir kind of movie again, like where it's sort of kind of grounded in this 1940s through 60s kind of suits, and kind of like the kind of looks, the cars or everything are kind of unique, but like futuristic from that time, and it just has a supremely unique look, and it was one of the first movies to kind of do that kind of look. While Dark City may have pulled from Blade Runner and this movie and stuff, this is really one of the first movies that was doing it, a lot like Blade Runner.
Yeah. No, this film definitely has a distinct style to it, and it definitely harkens to noir films, but it still has its own qualities to it. I would say it stands out to me much more than Dark City does. It definitely has its roots in noir and neo-noir, but I feel like it can be less blatantly placed in that genre, whereas Dark City definitely fits that mold.
Yeah, it's very... Brazil is almost unlike any other film.
Yeah.
And that's hard to say, for a lot of people, like, oh, this is like Inception's unlike any other film, right? But, like, Brazil is unlike any other film other than something that Terry Gilliam has done.
Yep.
And like, maybe like 12 Monkeys is kind of close, but Brazil, it has this element of very, very dark humor, almost, and then some of it is like slapstick humor. Some of it's very comedically timed jokes. Some of it, there's some very extremely dark things. There's like, references to lobotomy, torture, murders to for the government. I mean, there's all these different things in this movie. There's references to kind of humanity's obsession with beauty. There are kind of the aging of society with all these events, like having beautiful places that become dystopian.
Yep.
There's so many different things inside this movie, and it's almost everything is in the movie for a reason, like it's symbolic of something. And it's almost overwhelming the first time you see this movie. In fact, I know some people who can't even watch this movie because they start watching it with them and they're like, I can't watch this. Like, there's so much stuff happening in this film.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of heavy subjects, really.
Yeah.
Some of it's lightened with some comedy, but I would still say the darkness of these topics definitely still shows through.
Yeah, I would say a majority of this is pretty dark.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Especially the ending.
That's the whole thing. Like, we're going to actually talk about the ending, so just be aware of that. If you haven't seen Brazil and you want to get the full experience of what Brazil is.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, so this is one of the ones which I'm like really like we're going to talk about the ending, and Brazil is a very highly regarded movie. So if you want to watch it first, I really recommend it, and then just continue this podcast later after you watch it.
It's been out since 1985. We're not doing any travesties here.
So we're like 31 years into it, so yeah. But the basic story is that there's this character named Sam Lowry.
Yes.
I was saying it. And in the very beginning of the movie, there's basically a paperwork error in which one man named Harry Tuttle,
Yep.
his paperwork, he's basically a criminal, Harry Tuttle.
Yeah.
He's this like heating engineer played by Robert De Niro. So basically a bug causes an error, and one of his crime listings basically that shows who the crime is attributed to
Yeah.
and who's basically being charged with the crime, it gets mixed up. So instead of being Harry Tuttle, it's Harry Buttle. And that starts the whole thing. It's one little piece of paperwork
Yep.
ruins everything. And so because of that, a man named Harry Buttle is...
He's a cobbler.
Yeah, he's a cobbler, and he's arrested. And he's charged with this crime, and he's basically killed, being interrogated. This is right in the beginning of the movie. And Sam basically is trying to deal with it.
Yeah.
Like basically his department has to deal with this issue.
Yeah, he's a government employee. And it should be noted that he's having these daydreams about a damsel in distress. And when he first goes to visit the Buttle's widow, he discovers this woman that, he's been seeing in his dreams.
Yeah, exactly. And her name's Jill Layton.
Yep.
And basically this whole thing is he's trying to resolve this issue. And basically paperwork is like the most important thing in the society. Basically the government is extremely crazy in this
It kind of reminds me
world.
of Futurama and how like ridiculous the paperwork stuff is in that.
Yeah, it's a very, very good example. Is Futurama's like view that paperwork is everything. Like everything has to be done correctly. Like if you have to go to the IRS, it's a gigantic place like where they have guns at you all the time.
Yep.
And this is very much that. Anyone who opposes the government in any way is killed or interrogated, which basically means that they're killed.
Mm-hmm.
And basically anybody's just shoved underneath the rug. Like it doesn't really matter if somebody is out of place in the society. That's what the worst thing you could do is. There's all these bombings and all stuff happening, but as long as everything looks nice and clean and people can keep doing what they're supposed to do, basically living a normal life in view of the government, then that's what is right.
Yeah.
And so Sam trying to fix this paperwork error is like he just thinks it's going to be a little thing, but it basically balloons in this whole thing where because he's trying to find this woman,
Yep.
he basically takes a promotion which he didn't want to try and get higher so then he can basically access the higher systems to find out more about her. And,
yeah, he's trying to get transferred to the information retrieval department.
Yeah, so this whole thing, basically Jill, the woman that he wants and he's daydreaming after, is a terrorist.
Mm-hmm.
And he sees this whole thing about like terrorism is this awful thing. The government is always right, and everything.
Yep.
But the more he kind of delves into it, the more that he has to deal with the government, he realizes like, the moment I don't want to do my 9-to-5 job and I don't want to do this, then they're, it's not acceptable, and like everybody thinks I'm insane,
Yep.
And he basically starts the movie in one place, in a very comfortable government job, which he's like can't really get fired from.
Yep.
And the more he wants to kind of do his own thing, and he just finds that all these people who I thought were my friends and all these people who I was dealing with and all this system I thought was fine is totally screwed up.
Yep.
And trying to deal with it and just his perception of it is totally different.
Yeah. And the more he pushes away from it, the more he sees that you will be chastised for that if you do not conform to the government or society's ideals for you. You'll be labeled as a criminal or a terrorist or someone who is causing harm to the world.
Yeah, and it's not even for the most of the movie, he's not even doing really big things. He just wants there's and this is where I'm gonna kind of get into spoilers because I want to talk about it. I have to talk about it later in the movie in order to address this. So, if that setup sounds good to you, watch it.
Yeah.
But from here on, it's gonna be spoilers until the end of the episode. So, so there's a part later in the movie, really, really late in the movie, where he's addressing all the crimes,
Mm-hmm.
that he's being charged with, and there's things where he says oh, you're a nuisance, that's a charge, a crime
Yep.
against the government is being a nuisance, and he's basically saying oh, you need to choose a lawyer even though he's gonna be tortured and everything. He's oh, you need to choose a lawyer, and he's basically only given it's oh, the longer you take, the more charges you get on you.
Yep.
The more expensive this is for you to not have a lawyer, and most of the big crimes are not having doing the paperwork incorrectly.
Yeah.
Or or not following the procedure of the government, and that's that's the main thing that he's being charged with.
Yep.
And to the point of where he gets, in the end, lobotomized for it.
Yep.
And so it's a very, very unique thing like in a very interesting way to look at the way that a country can treat somebody. And I bet a lot of people would see a lot of correlations to the way that a lot of the governments handle people. The way that in this movie is they just like deal with it. Like if this guy isn't with us, he's against us. Like if he isn't 100% in line with what we like. And it's a very, very interesting viewpoint. Like this movie, it just comes from so many angles.
Yeah, it's definitely pulling from a lot of literary and film theory ideas, and
1984, the book, the George Orwell story, definitely.
That's where I was going to go next with this. Is it very much harkens to kind of 1984 and George Orwell's criticism of the government and of how society will basically chastise you for not fitting a specific mold, and even more so in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And it's one of those movies where everybody is expected to perform a certain task, and if they don't do it, then they're considered outside the law, they're considered evil, they're considered criminal. And I feel like this movie hits hard today. I feel like perhaps maybe even more so than it did when it came out, specifically because of a lot of the social issues and political issues that I would say that people in our age bracket are dealing with, because we're kind of starting to see what it's like to question the ideas presented to you by the government. That things like WikiLeaks have happened, and we've seen the extent of what the government's capable of and how we're affected when we don't agree with it.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I really, really agree with that. In fact, the more I watch this movie, the more years go by, and I, come back and watch it again.
Yep.
The more relevant it is.
Yep.
And that's pretty crazy for a sci-fi neo-noir movie that was made inside of 1985 by somebody who was most popular for making a movie about little dwarves that travel through time with a child.
Yep.
But it's really true. If this movie came out today, it would be a different film. Because while this movie is more about ideas, and of course it's kind of like a fight the power sort of thing, right? Or
yeah.
You would think that, but it's not totally that, because you see it from two different perspectives. Like you can live comfortably being okay with the government, if you just submit to it. Like a lot of people inside of the movie who are perfectly content being part of the government, that's okay. Even like middle and lower class, but like there's the whole thing of like if somebody makes a mistake or you are out of line, then that's it. That very much does relate to how the internet world, in which a lot of information can come out and people get pissed,
Yep.
And then they oppose it, and then there's all this kind of stuff that they go through, and all their life's in danger, and people want to torture them. I mean, literally, people want like that. Those things exist.
Yep.
Like this is it's not even fiction in some ways. The things that this movie brought up years ago, and yeah, like I'm sure a lot of people use this for like the at the time maybe like, oh, the war on drugs, this is the representation of, like, the war on drugs and like how it's failing and everything. Like
Yep.
I'm sure people have tried to take that stance, but it really is about like the structure of society and the government, and like what it means to oppose it, and if you even can escape it. In fact, the interesting thing about the ending, right, is in the end, Sam Lowry gets lobotomized for opposing the government.
Mm-hmm.
And inside of his mind, he's like living on this, on like this remote area with Jill, and he's like happy, and he basically gets to live out his fantasy for all time. He basically is insane.
Yep.
But it's interesting because he's technically free.
Yep.
Like he gets to live the life he wants, and he basically lost. So, and he's basically unlike everybody else in the entire movie. He's the only one that is technically not trapped in that awful world anymore.
Yeah. And if you look at what happens, from a a plot standpoint, you could maybe make the argument that what this movie is trying to say is the only way to escape these things is death.
Yeah, exactly.
That there is no hope for uniqueness or individuality or free thought or speech or action except to accept your death. And that's a really dark topic.
Yeah, that's pretty true. In fact, even this is a very unique movie in that they spent a lot of time on the love interest,
Yeah.
Jill, and the killer.
Mm-hmm.
Like she dies. She basically I think she's like tortured. Like they basically inside of like this one sentence they say, oh, she's dead. Like
Yep.
like. So yeah, there's a lot of really interesting things about this movie, and there's so many different commentaries on like the rich versus the poor and all these different things and what is beauty and it's just really, really interesting. It does so many different things, but I also want to talk about there's basically a different version of this film. And if you have the Criterion Collection, it's like 3-disc version, not there's like a one disc version, and there's like a 3-disc version. And the 3-disc version comes with like a television edit. It's basically an edit done like for the North American market,
Yeah.
And it basically takes out a whole bunch of the really deep kind of
The dark things that might upset Westerners.
yeah. It basically kind of cuts out a lot of like the dream sequences and kind of the really dark things.
The things that might
makes a happy ending.
The things that might allude to what the Western government is like.
I mean, you can say that, but it definitely makes it more palatable.
Yeah.
But it's called the Love Conquers All version, and basically it has a happy ending, and like Sam actually does go and live happily ever after with Jill. And if you watch it, actually doesn't make a lot of sense with the way how much they cut out.
Yeah.
Like it just cuts really dramatically. I'm just like, that doesn't make any sense of what just happened. Like, but it's a very unique way to see the film because of like it was obviously edited by somebody. And keep in mind, this is actually like a studio edit basically.
Yeah.
That you can tell just totally doesn't get the point of it.
Mhm.
It's definitely made by somebody who is probably part of the system, doesn't understand what this movie stood for, and
Kind of guy who just does cocaine off of strippers' asses in his free time and, rakes in the dough.
yeah, yep, something like that. I mean, it's really, really interesting, but it's funny that they, like Terry Gilliam, of course, totally disavows this thing. In fact, there's this whole battle, like a really famous battle that he had with the guy who edited it and the production company, saying like, sending like audio reels or audio recordings saying like, you are destroying my vision. I wouldn't have done this if I had known you would. I wouldn't have made the movie if I'd known you'd done this. And this whole thing, but it's just really, really interesting to see that like version of it. If you can get a hold of it.
Yeah, I would say that version definitely takes most of the heaviness out of this film.
Yeah, it has more scenes with Jill and Sam kind of just talking and
Yeah.
kind of building that relationship more and less about like Sam's existential crisis.
Yeah.
But
I would also say that this is a very important film to watch before Election Day.
oh my gosh, yeah, jeez, that's so true. Seriously, this film's more relevant than ever. It's really weird. But one of the things that I do want to mention is that Terry Gilliam is a very, obviously unique director.
Yeah.
He used a lot of like wide-angle lenses in this movie too, and he was famous for that too. But this movie does have a problem, and I really want to address it. And so I feel that Sam's relationship with Jill, or his infatuation with Jill, isn't the best in this movie. And I think that's because Terry Gilliam, he was not the biggest fan of the actress who played Jill.
Yeah.
And he cut a lot of her scenes out because she felt like she was just too dry or, and wasn't really working in the scenes as well.
Mhm.
And yeah, I have to agree. Like, she's probably the weakest performance in this movie, which is, I mean, that's, like, everyone's movie is really good.
Yeah.
Like, and, but yeah, she's definitely the weakest. And while I do really like the way it's edited, I felt like they could have made that work a little bit more. Just so when she is taken away from him, that I would have felt the emotion more from that.
Yeah. I would agree with that, especially because, the ending scene is, him drifting off into basically his insanity and picturing himself with her. I think it's kind of important to emphasize their relationship a bit more.
And yeah, well, I do think that the whole like his dream sequences of like, oh yeah, he's been dreaming of her, like he's been waiting his whole life, for her or whatever. It's like, yeah, that's cool, but you could have made the real life Jill more interesting.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much our only complaint. In fact, I think that the rest of what this movie tries to do, it does really well.
Yeah.
The pacing is a little all over the place.
Yeah.
Like, but I don't think that's really the point of this film.
Yeah.
Like this film is trying to set up something. What it's trying to do, it does well.
I would
And
agree.
That's That's really what matters for me in this film. It's trying to be unlike pretty much anything else. And yeah, the pacing's a little bit off. I feel like it's really hard to say. It's like the beginning is like really, really well paced.
Yeah.
The middle, like when he's trying to research all stuff, it drags a little bit, and then the ending is like all over the place, like because of what happens in the story. So it's kind of a mess in that way. But it's just like it's just so unique that it's hard to really bash on it for that. Like I feel like I'd feel really bad if I was to say like, oh, don't watch this movie because the pacing is a little off and some places a little slow. Because I think this movie's still worth the watch, and it for what the pacing is for it, like it makes you focus on those parts and kind of like interpret it. I don't know. It's really hard to explain, but
I would agree. I think the pacing isn't perfect in this film, but I don't find it distracting. It certainly doesn't take away from anything that the film is trying to do. And I just quickly wanted to, just for the sake of argument, because we always got to argue each other. While I mostly agree with you that they probably could have added some more depth to the real Jill, if you look at what the movie is doing and what it's criticizing, you could make a case for the fact that maybe the real Jill shouldn't have been interesting, because in this world, the only thing that's interesting are your dreams, because real life isn't allowed to be interesting.
That's true.
Yep.
You definitely make that argument.
But
yeah. Well, that's Brazil. It's a 1 in a million film.
Yeah.
Like, even today, you'll probably still be like, what the heck is going on in this?
And this is where I kind of have to briefly retouch on the fact that I say that I had more fun watching City of Lost Children. City of Lost Children is more fun from the standpoint that it's got a little more whimsicalness to it, and it's not quite as dark. This film is a harder watch, but it is totally worth it, and I definitely think is the better movie of the two. This movie it really holds up despite its age, which is, while Dark City might still be a good movie, I feel like is more dated than Brazil is.
Yeah, it's true. I would definitely say that is, but that's mostly because of the way the effects are done.
Yeah.
And well, I guess I'm a story writing too, but yeah, you get it.
But basically, if you haven't seen this film, you need to watch it.
And like I said again, this film is not for everybody. I would just say go into the film kind of expecting something different.
Yeah.
Like that's my biggest recommendation for this film, because if you go into it expecting like an average kind of sci-fi film or a film even like Blade Runner, I mean, you're not going to get that. I mean, it's its totally own unique thing.
If you don't want your beliefs challenged, maybe this isn't the movie for you.
Yeah, just go watch go watch something else. but yeah, I really recommend Brazil. It's a very unique experience.
I agree.
So yeah, well, that concludes our movie episode. As always, they are very word heavy.
Yep.
But
yeah, talking about the Kelvin scale.
yeah, exactly. But this has been GothCast. This is episode 26. I'm Dr. Sanders.
I'm Robbie Gore.
And of course, GothCast is part of the Belfry Network. It's a network of podcasts related to goth culture and anything you could want to know about gothic culture, whether it's music, if you want kind of playlists, if you want, good recommendations for music, or even things for books or anything like that. Any of one of the podcasts can help you with something like that.
They also have YouTube channels that they support.
Yeah, and blogs and artists and everything. So if you're into goth, check out the Belfry Network. It's www.thebelfry.rip. That's BELFRY.RIP.
Yep. And then, of course, got to mention our social media as always. So we have our website, which is gothcastradio.com. No www, because why would we do that? And we have a Facebook, which is just GothCast. Instagram is just GothCast. And we have a YouTube channel, which is GothCast Space Video. And, of course, you're always welcome to contact us. We're happy to answer any questions or respond to any comments, requests. We're always happy to hear from you guys, and you can reach us on any of those mediums.
All right. Hope you've enjoyed it, and stay spooky.